She's great at video games, I'll give her that. But this is the real sky, honey, step aside. The squadron leader's mocking voice echoed through the briefing room, cutting deep like a knife. Every male pilot got those coveted combat assignments except her, the only one who'd shattered records with 5 consecutive kills in those intense training simulations, can you believe it? They dismissed it all as just pretend, nothing more than a game. But when the radar lit up showing 5 enemies eliminated and only 1 jet returning triumphantly, the entire base fell into a stunned silence. How could they not? Who was she, this overlooked force? And why did they dare laugh at her until there was absolutely nothing left to say? What kind of training leaves you returning alone, but never empty-handed, your spirit unbroken? Lieutenant Eliza Grant, just 28 and brimming with untapped potential, stood alone in the briefing room after everyone else had filed out, her heart pounding with frustration. The whiteboard still displayed the mission assignments, 8 names boldly listed under the flight roster, but hers had been cruelly crossed out in that glaring red marker, a symbol of rejection that burned in her chest. She'd graduated top of her class from tactical simulation training, earning the fierce call sign Widow for her uncanny ability to eliminate multiple targets in rapid succession. Wow, what a feat. In the simulators, she was utterly untouchable, a legend in the making. Perfect kill ratios, flawless tactical decisions, split-second reaction times that made even the toughest instructors pause and watch in awe. How could anyone doubt her after that? But Hunter Ridge Air Base clung to that old-school mentality, where combat experience trumped everything else, no questions asked. And Eliza? She had none. 0 real-world scars to show. The veteran pilots sneered at her as the paper pilot, skilled on screens but untested in the real sky. Oh, the injustice of it all. Major Thompson, the squadron leader, didn't even try to hide his skepticism, his words dripping with doubt. Grant, you're staying on ground support today. Monitor communications. Track radar contacts. Let the real pilots handle the flying. Those words stung like fire, but not because they were cruel, no. They stung because Eliza knew exactly what was coming, and nobody, not a soul, would listen to her warnings. She'd spent 3 exhausting, sleepless nights poring over intelligence reports about the Sierra Gulf sector, her mind racing with possibilities, enemy movement patterns, electronic warfare capabilities, likely attack vectors, every detail etched into her brain. The mission plan the squadron was using had a fatal flaw, a deadly blind spot in Sector 3 where enemy jammers could disable their communications and targeting systems. Why wouldn't they see it? During yesterday's tactical briefing, she tried desperately to warn them, her voice steady despite the nerves. Sir, if I may. Eliza had stood up, pointing urgently to the map display. This flight path has a vulnerability. If the enemy deploys electronic countermeasures here, our entire formation will be exposed, completely vulnerable. I recommend an alternative route that maintains communication links while providing better defensive positioning. Major Thompson had barely looked up from his coffee, dismissing her with a wave. Lieutenant, that's just textbook theory. Real combat doesn't follow your computer models. We know what we're doing, we've been there. Captain Hayes, a grizzled 15-year veteran, had laughed openly, his chuckle like salt in the wound. Maybe stick to what you know, Grant. Leave the real flying to people who've actually been shot at. Ha! The room had erupted in chuckles, a wave of mockery that crushed her spirit. Her carefully prepared tactical analysis was literally thrown in the trash. Can you imagine the humiliation? Thompson had crumpled it up and tossed it aside without even reading a single word, discarding her hard work like garbage. Now, watching the F-16 second taxi toward the runway through the tower windows, Eliza felt a familiar knot twisting in her stomach, not fear for herself. Oh no, but a deep dread for what she saw coming, a tragedy unfolding before her eyes. The mission brief was clear. Intercept 5 unidentified aircraft that had violated restricted airspace. Simple, right? Intelligence suggested they were testing defensive responses, probing for weaknesses like predators circling prey. But Eliza's analysis showed something far different, something sinister. The timing, the approach vectors, the electronic signatures, this wasn't a probe at all. This was a coordinated strike using the exact vulnerabilities she'd identified. How could they be so blind? She pulled up the radar display on her monitoring station, tracking the squadron's progress with bated breath. 8 green dots moving in perfect formation, following the standard intercept pattern, professional, by the book, but oh so predictable. Exactly what the enemy was counting on. Her fingers drummed against the console as she watched the distance close, her anxiety building with every second. On her personal tablet, she had the alternative flight plan, the one Thompson had so arrogantly dismissed. Why wouldn't they listen? 27 pages of meticulous tactical analysis, threat assessment, and contingency planning, all useless if nobody would even give it a glance. Heartbreaking, isn't it? The radio crackled with routine check-ins. Hunter Base, Tiger Flight is airborne, proceeding to Waypoint Alpha. Copy, Tiger Flight. Weather is clear. No additional traffic reported. Normal pilot chatter filled the air. Confident voices of men who'd flown hundreds of missions echoed through. They had every reason to feel secure, or so they thought. They had no idea they were flying straight into a trap that could have been avoided so easily. Eliza stared at the radar screen, watching the green dots advance toward what she knew would be a killing field. God help them, she whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling with worry. The radio chatter started casual, almost playful, like a boys' club in the skies. Eliza monitored from the command center, her eyes glued to the 8 green dots advancing across the radar display. Hey, Widow. Captain Hayes's voice crackled over the comm, laced with sarcasm. You getting all this down in your little notebook? Make sure you write about how real pilots handle business, yeah. Laughter echoed across the channel, stinging her ears. Major Thompson cut in. Keep it professional, gentlemen. But then he added, Hayes is right, Grant. Hope you're taking notes. This is how it's done outside the simulator. Pay attention. Eliza's hands clenched around her coffee cup. Her knuckles white with frustration. She wanted to warn them about Sector 3 so badly. But ground support wasn't supposed to interrupt flight operations. What was she to do? Tiger Flight, approaching Waypoint Alpha, Lieutenant Morrison reported. Sky is clear. No contacts visible. On Eliza's screen, she could see what they couldn't, 5 red dots approaching from the northwest. Using terrain masking, exactly where her analysis had predicted. Oh no, it was happening. Contact bearing 270. Range unknown, Hayes called out. I'm seeing something on thermal, but nothing on radar. That's the jamming, Eliza thought desperately, her heart racing. They're using electronic countermeasures while maintaining target locks on our planes. How can this be unfolding just as I feared? Tiger 2. Confirm contact, Thompson ordered. Negative on radar contact. Thermal's fuzzy too. Might be a ghost signal. Stay in formation. Probably atmospheric distortion. Eliza couldn't stand it anymore. The tension was unbearable. She keyed her microphone. Hunter Base to Tiger Flight. Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers. Multiple contacts approaching from northwest quadrant using electronic warfare now. Static filled the channel. Then Thompson's voice came sharp and irritated. Ground control. Maintain radio discipline. We don't need simulator scenarios right now. Stay out of it. Sir, this isn't a scenario. My analysis shows. Grant, get off this frequency. That's an order. The channel went quiet, leaving her in agony. Eliza stared at the radar screen in horror as the red dots closed distance less than 60 seconds until the enemy would be in firing position. Please, no. She reached for her secure phone when Hayes's voice exploded over the radio. Missiles inbound. Multiple contacts, they came out of nowhere. Break formation, Thompson shouted. Evasive maneuvers. My targeting system's down, Morrison called out, panic thick in his voice. I can't get a lock. Electronic warfare package is active, another pilot reported. Communications degrading. Radar intermittent. Eliza watched the chaos unfold. Her worst nightmare coming true, the enemy had executed the exact attack pattern she'd outlined in her discarded report. Her squadron was flying blind. Their technology useless, how heartbreaking. Formation scattered. Tiger 4 is hit, someone screamed. Tiger 4 going down! The radio erupted in overlapping transmissions, damage reports, position calls, desperate coordination attempts, but communications were so jammed that pilots couldn't find each other, let alone the enemy. Pure pandemonium. Base, this is Tiger Lead. Thompson's voice was strained, laced with fear. We need immediate support. Request backup aircraft urgently. The base commander's voice came over the emergency channel. Negative, Tiger Lead. All available aircraft are committed. You're on your own. Good luck. Eliza stared at the radar display. Her breath catching 4 friendly signals had gone dark already. The remaining F-16 second were scattered across 50 miles of airspace, being picked off one by an enemy that could see them perfectly while remaining invisible. Unfair, isn't it? In the corner sat the backup F-15 Eagle, a single-seat fighter on alert status, gleaming under the lights. Eliza looked at it through the window, then at her tactical analysis on her tablet. She knew exactly where the enemy aircraft were positioned. Her plan could work, yes. It had to. Not the defensive plan that had been rejected, but an offensive counterattack that could turn the tide. Tiger 6 is down, echoed from the radio. Repeat, Tiger 6 is down. That left only 3 aircraft from the original 8. The losses. Eliza made her decision, her resolve hardening like steel. She grabbed her flight helmet and tablet, slipping out while the duty officers were focused on the radio chaos. Her pulse thundering. The maintenance chief was nowhere to be seen. Perfect timing. The F-15 was fueled and ready, sitting on the tarmac like a caged predator eager to unleash. Eliza had hundreds of simulator hours on this exact aircraft model. She knew every system, every capability, every tactical advantage inside out. She climbed into the cockpit and began the startup sequence, her fingers moving automatically across the controls with practiced precision. The engine spooled up with a satisfying roar, audible even over the base's blaring emergency sirens. Exhilarating. Unknown aircraft on taxiway Delta. Identify yourself immediately, came the tower's urgent call. Eliza keyed the radio. Tower, this is Lieutenant Grant in Eagle 77 requesting immediate emergency takeoff authorization now. Negative. You are not authorized for flight operations. Stand down. Sir, I have tactical intelligence on enemy positions. I can end this engagement. Let me. Grant, return to parking immediately. That's a direct order. Instead of responding, Eliza pushed the throttle forward and rolled toward the active runway. Behind her, she could hear vehicles starting up, security forces trying to intercept her, but she was already committed to takeoff. No turning back now. As the F-15 lifted off, Eliza felt a familiar calm descend over her. Washing away the chaos, the simulator scenarios had prepared her for this exact situation, down to the last detail. She knew where every enemy aircraft was positioned based on their attack pattern. Time to prove that paper pilots could write their own endings. Yes. They threw her plan in the trash. They mocked her warnings. They flew straight into a trap she had seen coming from miles away. And when everything fell apart, only one person remained who could save them. The person with the plan they had rejected so carelessly. When seasoned pilots fail, who saves the mission? Another soldier? Or the discarded strategy itself? And what happens when a paper pilot becomes the sole survivor? Astonishing, right? Comment the plan. If you believe sometimes an idea is stronger than an entire squadron, oh, how true. There's a kind of silence that only comes when predictions turn to reality, and the person everyone ignored suddenly becomes the only one who can hear the danger coming, loud and clear. The F-15 Eagle climbed rapidly through 20,000 feet, its powerful engines carrying Eliza above the electronic warfare interference that was crippling her squadron below freedom at last. From this altitude, she had a clear picture of the battlefield that no one else could see crystal clear. Her radar display showed the truth. 5 enemy aircraft in perfect ambush formation, exactly where her discarded tactical analysis had predicted they would be vindication. They were using the terrain and electronic jamming to remain invisible to the F-16 second while systematically destroying them ruthless. Eagle 77, this is Hunter Base. The tower controller's voice crackled with barely controlled fury. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Acknowledge now. Eliza switched to the emergency frequency, where the surviving F-16 pilots were still calling for help, their voices filled with desperation. Only 2 green dots remained on her scope, Thompson and one other pilot, both flying erratic evasion patterns, unable to coordinate because their communications were jammed, heart-wrenching. Any Hunter aircraft? This is Tiger Lead. Thompson's voice was desperate now, the arrogance completely gone, replaced by raw fear. We need immediate assistance. Unknown number of hostiles. Position uncertain. Weapon systems compromised. Help us. For a moment, Eliza considered responding, but Thompson had made it clear that he didn't want to hear from her fine then. Actions would speak louder than words, much louder. She pulled up her tactical analysis on the cockpit display, the same plan that had been thrown in the trash 3 days ago, now her lifeline. Every enemy position, every attack vector, every vulnerability was exactly as she had calculated, spot on. The enemy pilots were professionals, but they were following a predictable pattern, one she had foreseen. They had positioned themselves to exploit the blind spots in the standard defensive formation. But Eliza wasn't flying a standard pattern, no way. She was flying her own, bold and brilliant. The first enemy aircraft never saw her coming. Oh, what a thrilling surprise it must have been. Diving from above at nearly supersonic speed, her heart racing with adrenaline, Eliza locked onto the lead hostile with her AMRAAM missiles, her focus razor sharp. The pilot was so focused on hunting the F-16 second below that he didn't notice the new threat until Eliza's missile was already streaking through the air, too late for him. Fox 3, she called over the radio, using the standard code for a missile launch, her voice steady amid the chaos. The explosion lit up the sky like a fiery beacon of victory. 1 down, yes. Now the enemy formation was in utter chaos, their plans crumbling before their eyes. They had expected to face confused, isolated F-16 second with degraded systems, easy pickings. Instead, they were being attacked by a single F-15 that somehow knew exactly where they were and how they operated. How could that be? The second hostile tried to run, diving toward the deck in a desperate bid to escape. But Eliza had anticipated this move, her mind 1 step ahead. It was outlined in paragraph 12 of her tactical analysis, every detail mapped out meticulously. She had already positioned herself to cut off the escape route, blocking any chance of retreat. Another missile launch, bam! Another explosion rocked the air. 2 down, unbelievable. What the hell is going on up there? Thompson's voice crackled over the radio, confused and desperate, his tone laced with shock. Who's shooting? Who's out there saving us? The remaining 3 enemy aircraft finally located Eliza's position and turned to engage her directly, their engines roaring in defiance. This was the moment her simulator training became invaluable, thank goodness for all those hours. 3-on-1 aerial combat in a complex electronic warfare environment, a nightmare scenario for most. But Eliza had practiced this exact scenario hundreds of times, her skills honed to perfection. She knew how long each enemy missile took to reach maximum range. Every second counted. She knew their aircraft's turning radius and acceleration capabilities, down to the finest detail. She knew their tactics better than they did, the irony. The third hostile fired first, launching 2 heat-seeking missiles at extreme range, aiming to end her quickly. Eliza deployed countermeasures and executed a high G turn that her simulator training had burned into muscle memory, her body handling the forces with ease. The missiles passed harmlessly by, streaking off into oblivion. While the enemy pilot was still recovering from his attack run, dazed and vulnerable, Eliza had already lined up her shot, her cannon fire stitched across his aircraft's wing, sending it tumbling toward the ground in flames. "Take that. 3 down. Eagle 77, identify yourself," came an urgent call from the AWACS surveillance aircraft that had finally arrived on station, their radar sweeping the skies. "Confirm your status and mission. Who are you?" Eliza ignored the radio calls, her concentration unbreakable. 2 hostiles remained, and they were now working together, trying to bracket her in a coordinated attack, closing in like predators. This was the most dangerous part. Her pulse quickened. The enemy pilots realized they were facing someone with superior tactical knowledge and were adapting their strategy, shifting gears in a panic. But Eliza had planned for this, too. Of course she had. She led the 2 remaining aircraft into a high-speed chase through a narrow canyon, the walls closing in dramatically. Terrain she had memorized from satellite photos during her mission preparation, every twist and turn etched in her mind. The enemy pilots, desperate to score a kill, followed her into the trap, their judgment clouded by frustration. The canyon walls interfered with their radar tracking exactly as Eliza had calculated. Perfect. When she suddenly pulled up in a vertical climb at the canyon's end, soaring skyward with grace, the pursuing aircraft couldn't react fast enough to the terrain, their fate sealed. One pilot pulled up too late, his aircraft clipping the canyon rim and cartwheeling into the rocks below in a spectacular crash, heart-stopping. 4 down, the final enemy pilot, realizing he was alone and outmatched, his confidence shattered, tried to disengage and escape, fleeing for his life. But Eliza had positioned herself perfectly for this moment, the culmination of her tactical plan, everything coming together. As the hostile aircraft climbed desperately toward friendly airspace, engines straining, Eliza fired her last missile from optimal range. Gotcha! There was nowhere for the enemy pilot to run, no terrain to hide behind, no electronic countermeasures that could save him now. The final explosion echoed across the mountains, a thunderous end to the battle. 5 down victory. Silence filled the radio frequencies, a profound, quiet, descending. The electronic warfare jamming had stopped with the destruction of the enemy aircraft, and suddenly everyone could communicate clearly again. What a relief. "Hunter Base, this is Eagle 77, Eliza called calmly, her voice composed despite the rush. "Threat eliminated. 5 hostiles confirmed destroyed. Returning to base." The response was immediate and overwhelming chaos on the airwaves. Multiple voices tried to speak at once. Ground controllers, surviving pilots, base commanders, all clamoring. Everyone wanted to know who had just single-handedly eliminated an entire enemy squadron. Who was this hero? "Eagle 77, this is Tiger Lead." Thompson's voice came over the radio, subdued and respectful, a far cry from before. "Thanks for the assist. That was impressive, flying truly amazing." Eliza allowed herself a small smile, a quiet moment of satisfaction. "Just following the tactical plan, Tiger Lead. The one that was briefed 3 days ago, remember?" A long pause filled the channel, heavy with realization. Then Thompson's voice quietly, almost humbly. "Copy that, Eagle 77. Message received loud and clear." As Eliza began her descent toward Hunter Ridge, she could see the base in the distance, lights twinkling below. Emergency vehicles lined up on the runway, sirens silent but ready. Crowds of personnel gathered outside buildings, everyone waiting to see who would emerge from the aircraft that had just rewritten the textbook on aerial combat. Can you imagine the anticipation? She had taken off as paper pilot Grant, the simulator ace who supposedly didn't belong in real combat, dismissed and underestimated. She was returning as the only pilot who had seen the trap coming, the only one who had prepared for it and the only one who had survived to tell about it, triumphant. Her rejected tactical plan hadn't just saved the mission, oh no, it had saved lives and proven that sometimes the most important battles are won in the mind before they're ever fought in the sky. What a powerful truth. The F-15 touched down to a reception unlike anything Eliza had ever experienced, the wheels kissing the runway smoothly. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, their lights flashing against the evening sky, casting dramatic shadows. Ground crews, mechanics, pilots, and base personnel had gathered in unprecedented numbers. A sea of faces turned her way. As she taxied toward the parking area, Eliza could see the base commander's staff car racing across the tarmac, tires squealing, followed by what looked like half the officers on base, all eager to witness this. She shut down the engine and sat quietly in the cockpit for a moment, processing what had just happened, her breath steadying. 5 enemy aircraft destroyed, mission accomplished, squadron saved. Her tactical analysis had been perfect, flawless. When she finally climbed down from the aircraft, an unusual silence had fallen over the crowd, thick with awe. These were people who had watched the radar display, who had monitored the radio communications, who had witnessed something that would be talked about for years, legendary. General Morrison, the base commander, approached first, his stride purposeful. Behind him walked Major Thompson, his flight suit torn and his face bearing the strain of a man who had just survived the impossible, exhaustion etched in his features. Lieutenant Grant, the general said formally, but his voice carried unmistakable respect, warm and genuine. Report, sir, 5 hostile aircraft eliminated using tactical plan Delta 73. No friendly casualties after my engagement began. All objectives achieved, sir. General Morrison nodded slowly, absorbing the words. The tactical plan that was submitted for review 3 days ago. Yes, sir, the one that identified enemy approach vectors, electronic warfare capabilities, and optimal counterattack positions. A murmur went through the crowd, ripples of understanding spreading. Everyone now understood what had happened finally. The simulator pilot they had dismissed had not only been right about the threat, but had single-handedly eliminated it, turning the tide. Major Thompson stepped forward. Sir, if I may? He looked directly at Eliza, his earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by humility. Lieutenant Grant tried to warn us. Her analysis was comprehensive. We should have listened, God, we should have. The crowd was silent, absorbing the weight of that admission, the air heavy with reflection. General Morrison turned to his aide. I want that tactical analysis reviewed immediately by our best strategists. And I want Lieutenant Grant's recommendations for updating our standard defensive protocols now. Sir, Eliza interjected quietly, her tone firm. The analysis is already complete. It's been sitting in the squadron files since Tuesday, ready and waiting. Another silence fell, profound and telling. The implications were clear. If they had simply read her work instead of dismissing it, the entire engagement could have been avoided. What a missed opportunity. From now on, the general announced to the assembled crowd, his voice booming, all tactical submissions will receive full strategic review regardless of the submitter's flight status, and Lieutenant Grant will be leading our tactical planning division, effective immediately. Mark my words! Applause erupted from the crowd, but Eliza noticed the quality of it deep and sincere. Not the polite recognition given to someone who got lucky, but the genuine respect accorded to someone who had proven their expertise under fire earned through sheer brilliance. Later that evening, in the squadron-ready room, the atmosphere had completely changed, buzzing with newfound admiration. Pilots who had mocked her paper pilot status now approached her table with technical questions about electronic warfare countermeasures and multi-threat engagement tactics, eager to learn. Captain Hayes, who had made the video games comment just hours earlier, sat down across from her, his expression sheepish. Grant, I owe you an apology and a drink. Hell, I owe you dinner for the rest of my career. What was I thinking? Not necessary, Eliza replied simply, her eyes steady. Just read the tactical briefings next time, please. Hayes laughed, but it was the laughter of respect, not mockery, warm and appreciative. You know what they're calling you now? What? The widow? But not because you're good at simulators. He paused, studying her face with genuine awe. Because when you engage, you leave widows behind, damn. 3 weeks later, the Widow Mark protocol became standard training at every fighter squadron in the Air Force Revolutionary. Eliza's tactical analysis was classified and distributed as required reading for all combat pilots, a must-study. Her name was no longer associated with simulators. In theory, it was associated with 5 confirmed kills and the salvation of an entire squadron heroic. I didn't win because I flew better than them. I won because I had already seen everything before it happened. Foresight wins. They called me paper pilot like it was an insult. But paper is where battles are won, absolutely. In the planning, in the analysis, in the careful study of what your enemy will do before they know it themselves. Strategic genius. I spent 3 sleepless nights preparing that tactical analysis. Not because I wanted to show off, but because I could see what was coming clear as day. The attack vectors, the timing, the electronic warfare patterns. It was all there in the intelligence reports if you knew how to read them, hidden in plain sight. When they threw my plan in the trash, I wasn't angry. I was terrified because I knew exactly what would happen to those pilots' lives at stake, and there was nothing I could do to stop it until there was the moment arrived. The simulator training they mocked saved more than just my life that day. It saved us all. Every scenario I had practiced, every tactical decision I had rehearsed, every split-second calculation I had memorized, it all came together in 18 minutes of real combat that proved theory and practice aren't opposites. They're the same thing, seamless. Now, when young pilots come through tactical training, they study my engagement frame by frame intensely. They analyze the decisions, the positioning, the timing. They're learning the same lesson I had to prove the hard way. That preparation beats experience when preparation is done right, undeniable. Major Thompson visits my office every Tuesday now. Not to apologize anymore, but to review tactical scenarios with someone whose judgment he has learned to trust. Profound change. The arrogance is gone, replaced by the humility that comes from being saved by the person you underestimated. Humbling, isn't it? Captain Hayes tells people that he learned more about air combat in 5 minutes of watching my gun camera footage than in 15 years of flying. He's probably right, but the lesson isn't about flying. It's about listening, truly hearing. The military taught me to follow orders, but that day taught me something else eye-opening. Sometimes the most important order you can give is to yourself. When everyone else is wrong and lives are at stake, you don't wait for permission to do what's right. You just do it boldly. They still call me widow now, but the meaning has changed, evolved. I'm not the simulator ace who couldn't handle real combat. I'm the tactical analyst who eliminated 5 threats in 18 minutes because I had spent months preparing for exactly that moment. Preparedness pays off. The radar data from that engagement is still classified, but the lesson isn't timeless. Silence speaks loudest when it's followed by action. Powerful. I don't need them to celebrate me. I don't need parades or medals or recognition ceremonies, none of that. I just need them to read the briefings, to respect the analysis, to understand that sometimes the most important battles are fought in the mind long before they're fought in the sky. Profound wisdom. And when someone throws your plan in the trash, remember that doesn't make the plan wrong. It just means you'll have to prove it's right, and oh, how sweet that proof can be. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories if you believe silence speaks loudest, especially after 5 clean kills. What a story.